form, go onto our Facebook page, and we are streaming live there.
Cool.
Give us 1 second here just to make sure we're ready to go.
Micah, I was moving really fast. Did you have any questions so far?
No, that sounds super detailed. I mean, I think
it's probably too detailed, but I just wanted everyone to have all the tools, you know?
No, it's good. I think in a time like this, everyone wants a lot of information, and everybody on both sides. So I think it's amazing.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Now I got to find where the presentation went. There it is.
Perfect.
All right. Okay, let's talk about the waiver. So we used WaiverSign. There probably are a couple other waiver companies out there too, but they were great to work with. WaiverSign, they do a free, I want to say it was a free 1 week or 2 week trial, and then it's $10 a month. Totally worth it. And then we just canceled it when we were done. Let me go through a couple things. So, a couple things. So I'm going to send you guys the waiver so you can see it. But I want to encourage you to edit our waiver to cover you and your company. And I want to note, I am not your lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I got this waiver from an event space, and we edited it to fit our needs. If you're super concerned about liability, or if COVID continues to get worse and it becomes much more of a threat than it was in the middle of the summer, I just want to encourage you to have your own lawyer review it or create your own. But I do want to share it with you just so you know the kind of things that were covered there. We created a WaiverSign account. And then what it does is you upload the waiver there, and it finds where the blanks are, and it will encourage the person to, put their name in and sign where the blanks are. And then what it does is it gives us a link, and that's the link we share with people to encourage them to go sign the waiver. We took that link and we went to the QR code generator, which I know you can make QR codes for free, but this one sorts and files them and keeps track of how many times they're used. And I'm a data nerd, so I paid for it. And then we printed out a QR code, we laminated it, we printed multiple copies, and then we put them near the entrance. That way people on their way in could take their phones, scan it, fill it out, sign it themselves, completely contactless. And we could make sure that everyone came in. Print physical copies of the waiver in case there's no cell phone reception, or folks don't want to use their phones, or they don't know how to use their phones, and have hand sanitizer at the ready. Okay, this is my biggest piece of learning. Have someone at the door, making sure everyone either signs a physical waiver or does it on their phone to show confirmation. One of the things we did in the beginning was we thought, well, we should send the waiver out in advance. And so we sent it to ticket holders. And then the day of the show, some of them had done it, some of them hadn't. And I was looking through the WaiverSign folder, trying to figure out who signed it, who didn't, and wasting hours of time. So we said no more. So we did not send it out in advance. And we just said the easiest way to do this is have someone at the entrance to the backyard or the park or the event, making sure that no one comes in unless they've signed it and they show you on their phone or they sign the paper. And that's just the easiest way to save time and make sure you can do it. And then just so you keep track of it and you CYA, any physical copies, scan those in, download all the copies of the signed waivers from WaiverSign at the end of the tour, put them in a Dropbox or put them somewhere so you have them all in case you need them. I hope you don't. We haven't. So, okay, now I want to walk you a little bit through our tour promotion. So we have a joke in my office that every show that is created, I think there's something like 53 tasks that we do to promote those shows. I'm going to run you through kind of the high level of those things. Here's a high level overview of how we promote. So we use Bands in Town. It's a great tool for letting people know. And Bands in Town is connected to our artist websites. We use Songkick, same idea. You put all the information in, you put the ticket link in, but this is important because Songkick has a deal with Spotify. So if you have all your dates in Songkick and someone's listening to your music on Spotify and they're in their nearby area to a show, that show will show up there. We make Facebook events for all the shows, and we made the hosts, the co-hosts of the event. That requires a little bit of extra communication with the hosts and getting their Facebook information so you can add them as a co-host, but it was a huge tool in making sure that we got people to these shows. We have a couple things we do with email marketing. We use MailChimp, which I think is an Atlanta-based company, so they're awesome. We send an email to our full list, to her full list with all of the dates. That's kind of like when we announce, every time we announced a chunk, we sent an email to the whole list, even though she wasn't going to the whole country. You never know, people might have friends in different cities and they'll forward it along. Then we send targeted emails to fans in the cities where she was going. We tend to do 3 targeted emails. Well, I'm sorry, we tend to do 2 more targeted emails. We do the 1 email upon announce to everybody, and then we do 1 email about 2 weeks out. And those are for the planners, and those are for the people that plan ahead and buy tickets in advance and want to know what they're doing 2 weeks from now. And then we do another targeted email about 2 days out. And those are for the non-planners. And those are for the people that need multiple reminders of shows, or they're just now making plans for the weekend. So we find that that's a good mix. If we do much more than that, we see more unsubscribes. If we do less than that, I think we're leaving some opportunity on the table. We posted the full tour images to socials and story reminders with swipe ups to ticket links. Someone asked me this the other day. I know to have swipe up natively on your Instagram, you have to have, I think it's over 10,000 followers or be verified. Or if you pay for an ad, you have swipe up. So you can run ads on Instagram stories that are, Atlanta playing a show tonight, and that can be a swipe up, or Atlanta playing a show next Friday. And that can be a swipe up ad directly driving someone from Instagram to stuff. You don't have to have 10,000 followers to do that. We ran ads for the shows. We use ToneDen with Linkfire links so we can track what's working and what's not working. And then this is something Maggie, who works for me, she spent a lot of time doing this, and we have a whole slide coming up on hosts, but we gave hosts as much promotional material as possible. We gave them videos. We gave them the Facebook event. We gave them a link to a digital poster if they wanted to print it. We gave them promo photos, bios, press quotes, images, branding tour images. We just gave them so much just for whatever they might want to do. We wanted them to have as much information as possible. And then we really encouraged Jill along the route to post about the tour, and I'm out here and this is what I'm doing. We were also very careful and making sure in every post, which I'm sure you're seeing on social media now, if anyone does anything, they say the word socially distanced, like I'm having dinner, socially distanced. But we were just very cautious. We wanted to make sure people knew. Jill did a lot to make sure that people stayed safe. And she, when they got home, they all took COVID tests. They didn't have it. They didn't, she went to 27 cities on tour and didn't get COVID and was incredibly safe and worked really hard at that. So we're very proud of that. So when she was posting along the route, we, made sure that any photos, everybody had masks on. And we just want to make sure people knew that she was really working hard to keep them safe. Communication with hosts. So to any of you that are promoters or have promoted shows, or artists that deal with promoters a lot, just remember, house show hosts are not promoters. They likely have not done this much. So you have to spend a lot of extra time answering questions. Open communication is essential because so that we can make sure that their expectations are met and our expectations are met. We sent the marketing materials to them multiple times because, again, they're not promoters. They don't do marketing for a living. They might have missed the first email and all the details. So we sent it multiple times. We set them up to receive daily or weekly ticket counts. We actually gave them an option. And then towards the end, we made them all daily so that they knew every day, if their marketing efforts were paying off. And then Eventbrite doesn't automatically send them the names of people that bought tickets, just the total number of tickets purchased. So Maggie, who works for me, she would go in once a week and pull all the names so we could send to the hosts in case they had friends that they wanted to bug to buy tickets so they could see who that they have marketed to had actually bought tickets. One of the things I learned is I had to follow up a lot with the host to get the contract signed. Just because we were asking a lot of them. We were asking them, Jill talked to them, and then I sent a form, and then we sent marketing materials, and then we sent a Facebook, and it was a lot. So just be prepared to follow up with them a lot. In terms of advancing the shows, this is a big thing I learned. If you were going to advance a show at a venue, you would advance, I don't know, a week to 2 weeks out from your show. At a small venue. And I had hosts emailing me in July for their show in mid-September. Like, what time is she arriving? And so I learned very quickly that I went ahead and sent my advance email with information about what time she was arriving and sound system and all that kind of stuff. I sent that as soon as the show was confirmed, just because I realized I was about to field a lot of questions if I waited much longer for that. Also, we let them know way in advance what we needed from them. So Jill was in an RV. We needed to find a place to park that. We asked them if they could provide a table because she couldn't fit a table in her RV, and all of them did. It was great. And then we asked the host if they didn't mind being available 2 hours before the show to help load in and set up. And all of them were super excited to help. And it was really lovely. So Jill made these signs and we put them everywhere. We had them like leading into the yards or into the parks. She made another one. I don't have a picture of it, but she would put it kind of in front of her, and it said something to the effect of like, "I love you, but I need space." It was just, I was proud of, and all of this was Jill's brainchild, just to really, really brand it that we are taking these things seriously and we will not be lax on them. So, when Jill was on her way, she would call or text the host and give them a more exact arrival time. We told them about 2 hours out, but she would let them know. She would come in early and set up signage, merch, sound check. So she bought a Bose sound system. You can see it here. It's that little tower. I think it weighs around 30 pounds. It was amazing. Plenty of sound for what she was trying to do. And because we're wanting people to be more spread out, I would definitely encourage you, if you did something like this, to get a sound system or rent one, just because you don't want people to, want to sit close to you to hear if it's just acoustic. And then she would talk through the logistics of the night with the host and say, where do you want people to enter from? Where do you want me to stand? And a lot of times the host would help kind of section off areas where people could sit and kind of keep it 6 feet apart. But I found that most people really self-policed themselves because we did such a good job of marketing the tour and what we expected. Most of the places, the doors open 30 minutes to an hour before the show. She did 2 45-minute solo sets with a break in between to sell merch. And we found that was really great because people kind of got up and stretched their legs and bought some stuff and then sat back down and then bought more stuff on their way out. So that really helped us move a lot of merch. She set up at least 10 feet away from the front row of the audience, and she put that sign there to kind of designate where that was. And she wore her mask the whole time, and she just took it off when she was singing. And that's why she wanted those 10 feet so that particles wouldn't hit people when she was singing. Let's talk a little bit about merch. So we found that people bought as much merch, if not more, than they would have at a regular show. And probably the price like per head that we brought in was way higher because she was doing a similar amount of merch each night that she would have done at a 200 capacity venue. But most of these shows were 30 to 50 people. We did a tour specific t-shirt that sold really well. I tend to not recommend artists go buy some sort of tour related merchandise because it's really hard to sell when the tour's over. But we did this for 2 reasons. One, she's definitely going to do another leg. So I felt like if we had some left over, we could keep selling them. And 2, it feels like a very special moment in time in the world. And I think that we sold out of the shirt twice. I reordered it twice and I wasn't expecting to have to. So that was really great. We upgraded the checkout. So we got the newer Square Reader, which is the one that people can do Apple Pay or insert their card themselves. We, laminated the pricing sheet. She doesn't use Venmo at her merch table, but if you do, you could make a QR code for Venmo and people could just scan the QR code and pay you that way. So there's nothing exchanged at all. And then Jill, she actually signed for everyone on her phone. She just asked them if the receipt's over $25, someone has to sign for it. And she would just say, is it okay if I sign this? And they all said yes, so that she didn't have to hand them her phone and no one was touching anyone. And then she had hand sanitizer at the table. She had a lot of hand sanitizer everywhere. Okay, so let's talk about bathrooms. This is the number one question we get from people about how we did this. I never thought I would have a presentation with a slide called bathrooms, but here we are. There's a couple options. So this is something you definitely want to talk to the host about in advance. You can do something like this. So this is actually my house. I have a basement back door and I have a bathroom right down the hallway. So I just taped off, like, do not go up here. The bathroom was just kind of right here and made it very obvious. This is where you go. And then on the outside door of my house, we had a sign that said bathroom occupied or bathroom open. And the rule was one person inside at a time with a mask on. So we told people that as they were walking in, and then Jill announced it from the microphone during the intermission of the show that was the rule and that's how it was going. And I felt really safe about it. There's never more than one person inside my house, and they really just literally walked down a hallway to a bathroom. She brought extra hand sanitizer. We had a sign in the bathroom that said, like, please wipe things down. We had extra spray and wipes. And then at the end of the night, when everyone was gone, I went in there with a mask and gloves on and just wiped everything down, and it was really fine. There were some hosts that were so excited and had big properties, and they just went ahead and rented porta potties. We did not tell them they needed to, but some hosts just wanted to, and that felt like the easiest way to do it. There was one show, they lived pretty close, like a couple houses down from a convenience store. And so they told folks to just go to the convenience store if they needed to go to the bathroom. And there was one show where there was no bathroom in sight, and the host just didn't do it. So what we did, I actually think that one was a private show. So the host just let all their people know in advance, like, there's not a restroom at the show, be prepared. And as opposed to doing 2 45-minute sets, Jill did, I think she did one about an hour set so that people could leave and use the restroom if they needed to. But the most important thing is just having that conversation in advance so that you don't have different expectations than the hosts have. And if there is some sort of interesting or unique situation, you can let the ticket holders know in advance, and it doesn't make you look bad. So here are my top, I think it was 10 tips and it turned into 11. These are my top 11 tips for success. Give yourself at least a month to plan the tour, talk with hosts. It will take longer than you think. Give yourself then after that 6 to 8 weeks to promote the shows in a perfect world. We didn't do that here. We did okay. I think if we had had more time, we would have sold more tickets. We could have done more shows. I was proud of what we pulled off in such a short amount of time. Communicate consistently, constantly, and clearly with hosts so that they know what to expect. They are not promoters. I can't say that enough. They are lovely people that want to have you as a guest, and they don't know very much about the music industry. Collect your waivers at the door. Don't try to send them in advance, or it will be a logistical nightmare. Make a bathroom plan with hosts and communicate that in advance with fans. Communicate the rules and mask requirements consistently, constantly. You could even go so far as to brand your tour with it. Travel in an RV or a van if you can, so you have a place to sleep and you don't have to put yourself at risk. Or look at places where you're not like in a hotel where people are coming and going all the time, maybe a tent, maybe an Airbnb. A lot of the hosts are really sweet and they offered, but they always kind of offered timidly, like, she could stay here, but we didn't want to put anyone in that position. So she stayed in her RV. Make a personal rule to mask up as much as possible while traveling to minimize risk. I think it becomes, especially if you're traveling, it just becomes old. But she and her family wore their masks religiously anytime they were not in their RV. And I think that made a lot of difference because, like I said, they traveled to over 27 cities and came home without COVID. Bring extra hand sanitizer and lots of it. If you have any holes in your tour routing, do a specific shout out. So towards the end, there was one show we ended up having to cancel because the state changed their guidelines and it just wasn't safe. None of these were against any guidelines. They were all legal. They all, we did alter a few where we had originally hoped to have 50 people and we had to back the ticket count down, but we hadn't sold more than the capacity. So it was okay. But there was one show that we had to cancel because the state changed their requirements. And so she was going to take a different route. And we just did a shout out on social media. Hey, Jill has a hole in her schedule next week. Anyone in these cities want to host? And we had 3 or 4 people reach out and we ended up making one more show happen. So that was great. If you can bring someone with you to share the responsibilities, it's a lot of work. So we gave this presentation last week and Jill was a part of it. And she said this, and I completely agree that half of this stuff is not my job typically as a manager. I am not typically getting hosts to sign contracts and writing the contracts and chasing people down to sign contracts. That's the agent's job. I'm not typically negotiating with hosts. That's the agent's job. Jill's not typically routing the tour. That's the agent's job. and then also all the extra stuff like Jill planning bathrooms with the hosts. It's just a lot. It's a lot of work, and it's, touring in general is a lot of work, but adding all the extra safety precautions and things you need to do this safely, it's a lot of work. So that's the end of my presentation. I would love to take any questions people have. And like I said, I will share the links to the forms and the waivers. Obviously, you can do this any way you want to. I just want to give everyone as much information as possible to make it, possible for you if you want to do 1 show or 10 shows or 50 shows. I hope this music industry doesn't die. So I want to give you whatever I can to keep it going. Any questions in the chat or anything?
I have a question, Erin.
Yeah.
So how do you go about negotiating for a house show? Like, or a backyard show, how do you land on a value? I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of ways to do it, but what was your experience like doing that for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we went into it, the way I always like to do negotiation in general is, in this instance, start by asking the host what they were thinking. Because I don't want to represent Jill poorly and have it come across like, oh, we're asking for so much money in the middle of a pandemic, and seem greedy. But so usually what I would do is ask the host if they wanted the show to be private. We would say, what were you thinking budget wise? And then I would reply with, depending on how low or high that number was, well, this is what she usually gets for a house show. But because it's a pandemic and because she's already on the road and she'll already be traveling, this is what we're asking for. And I would reply with that if it wasn't too far off from what they were suggesting. It's a delicate thing, they were opening their house to her and, but the other thing we said was, we would quote them a price up to a certain number of people. So what we didn't want is like someone being like, oh, cool, we can get Jill to sing at our wedding for whatever, when she would usually charge, 5 times that to sing at a wedding. So we had some stipulations around that, like what the event needed to be. And if there were more than, I think it was if there were more than 25 people, the price was going to go up from that. So we set some stipulations. We didn't want someone to think they could just pay this lower rate and then invite everyone they've ever met and have like a 300 person party. Where if we sold 300 tickets to a show, she'd be walking away with a chunk of change. So we didn't want to undervalue that. So we kind of came up with a quote and then we put some stipulations around it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Cool. How much would it help to mail checklist magnets for the fridge prior? Oh, that is such a cool idea. I love that. Great question. The question was, I don't remember what platform this was from, but Ben said, how much would it help to mail checklist magnets for the fridge prior, like people do for weddings and save the dates? I love that idea. And I don't think those are too expensive. So that's a great idea. And then it would probably save you answering a bunch of questions and kind of help prepare you for that. So that's a really cool idea. I think it would help. I think, like I said, they're not promoters and they're not used to having shows and they're nervous. And and most of these people were Jill fans. I mean, it's not just random people that had never heard of her that just wanted to have music. The cool thing is that I think some of the attendees were people that were not familiar with her. They just were so craving a social experience and live music, they came. And I think it really grew her fan base some, which was awesome. But most of the people that hosted them were fans. And so they were so excited to help and be a part of it. Most of the questions and the over asking that we got came from people just being really excited and excited to host one of their favorite artists. So I think if you sent any kind of materials to prepare, they'd be all about it. So I love that idea. Another question, what was the gross revenue versus the cost? So it's a little bit hard to say because she bought an RV to do this, which I understand, and she understands. She was kind of in a unique position to do that. Obviously, for most tours, you don't go buy a vehicle. And I do think they're planning to sell it at some point. And so I don't know what the difference between what they bought it for and what they're going to sell it for is and what that cost is going to ultimately be. Gas in an RV is a little bit more, than a car. But honestly, because we weren't getting hotels every night, because she wasn't paying a tour manager, she just brought her husband and we were very thankful for his help. because the venues weren't taking a cut. The house show hosts were lovely and generous. They weren't making money on this. I would say we did fairly similar, if not better than we would have done had we done the venue tour, because people were super generous. They bought a lot of merch and there were fewer expenses if you don't count buying an RV and the extra gas for the RV. So we did pretty well. And I think it helped, it was like her album release tour. So those always do better because she's playing new music. People are excited. There had been a lot of press about her leading up to it. We didn't keep paying a publicist throughout this tour because it's a little hard to get, articles written about a tour where it's in people's backyards. Anything else? Do you think there's a way to do this if it's cold with heaters with COVID restrictions and shorter sets? I do think it's possible. Actually, there's a venue in Nashville, the City Winery in Nashville, built like an outdoor stage with a tent and they have heaters and they're just sitting people further apart. I don't know what it costs to rent heaters. I think that would be the big expense. And I don't think they're the kind of thing you could travel with them. Not like the big ones, that they have at restaurants when you're sitting on patios. That would be my question about it. I do think, COVID's back on the rise, but also we were planning this in June as COVID was on the rise again in July. And we had this moment where we had just put a month's worth of work into this thing. And we all went, is this going to get canceled? Like, are we going to have to cancel this whole thing? But what ended up happening was we canceled one show because the restrictions changed and everyone else was super respectful and safe. And it was great. So I don't know, what would happen, but I think you could totally do it in the cold. It just would be a matter of getting the heaters and then, how cold it was and where you were going. Obviously, it snows sometimes in Georgia, but Georgia and South could probably work better than going too far north. Another question, what were the biggest challenges to overcome on day of show, technically or logistically? A handful of things. I think traveling in an RV is different. So I know Jill had done a lot of touring in vans and I think it just took longer to get places than expected. So there were a couple moments where I was nervous she was going to make it in time. So we adjusted the time expectation after that. I think she did a really good job of getting her thing down. So she had her merch super organized. She had this little sound system that all she needed was one plug. It was just her and a guitar. We didn't have a bunch of musicians to tune. So they kind of had it down to a science where it was pretty quick. I think the biggest issue was sometimes figuring out how to direct people because we needed them all to come in the same area so we could get the waivers signed. So deciding, and inevitably wherever we put the table, people would go around the other side of the house. So working with the host to make sure there's signage and we're pointing people in the direction we want them to go and kind of funneling them. We thought at the beginning we were going to have to actually spray paint X's on the grass where they needed to go, but people pretty much self-regulated and they brought their blankets and they sat with their roommates or their partner and no one tried to sit close to anyone else. We didn't have to regulate that. So that was really great. I'm trying to think technical challenges. Jill said there were a couple times where there was one show where the neighbor just decided to weed eat in the middle of her show. And so from then on, we started asking hosts, please let your neighbors know what's happening. I mean, they might still choose to weed eat in the middle of the show, but, and she's not a rock band. There were no noise ordinance issues. It was quiet and lovely outdoor music, but there were a couple of those. I learned that when she was in my backyard, I didn't know there was an 8 p.m. train that was really loud every night and it went by for about 5 minutes. So you learn little things like that. When you're doing backyard shows. But I think the combination of the knowledge of how to tour in venues and how to do house shows, and we just kind of found the middle ground and we didn't have any major issues. I was very thankful for that. Anybody else?
Well, Erin, I think that is extremely helpful. This is crazy. This is crazy. Like I haven't heard of anybody else really doing this at all, and it seems like the way that you all did it was like extremely safe, effective, and beneficial for Jill. So I think this is going to be really helpful. Obviously, there's more questions than answers around live music going into 2021. So this is really, really helpful. So thank you for taking the time to do this. Just for those who are tuned in, either currently, if you're watching this video in the future, Erin, can you put up your email address somewhere, or should we? There it is. You can do it. contact@oliviamanagement.com. If you want these presentation slides, please email Erin there. Also, again, just to reiterate, she does artist consultation. I've done it. It's really, really helpful. So I'd encourage you to consider that. Also, just wanted to thank Tune Welders, who is our co-presenter here for this program. And also, if you want to support programs like this, please consider donating to ATL Collective. We should have all that information in the description if you're listening to this as well. Again, can't emphasize enough how helpful it would be if you guys reached out to Erin. She's amazing to talk through these ideas. So email her for these presentation slides and for a consultation, and we can go from there. Erin, did you have anything else that you wanted to say?
No, I just wanted to add that, I think someone asked me, like I said, we did this last week for some people in Nashville and presented this presentation, and someone asked, like, why would you do this? Because you're essentially like telling your competition what to do. And I don't see it that way. Like, we just taught 27 people how to host house shows, and they had a blast, and they would probably host other people. They had a good time. So, if y'all all get out there and do this, we can create a country full of people that celebrate the arts and help support artists and have them in their backyards. And I love that.
Yeah.
So don't hesitate to reach out.
That's great. All right, y'all. Well, thanks for tuning in to Hump Day Hang. This is an ATL Collective program. So glad that y'all